Menglong's secret diary. How a rising star's hidden pages exposed an industry's quiet cruelty. When the news first came, a sudden, inexplicable death that made fans across the country stop and stare at their phone screens. No one suspected there was a book waiting to flip open a truth far darker than grief. He was 30, a face on billboards, a voice in award show acceptance speeches, a man whose laughter made late-night interviewers grin. They called him a prodigy, a survivor of humble beginnings who had fought his way into the glare of cameras and the warmth of millions of fans. 2 days after the funeral, in the quiet of his childhood home, his mother found the diary. It was tucked beneath loose floorboards in the old dressing room where he had kept props, mementos, and a scattering of childhood drawings. A worn leather notebook, its spine soft from years of being opened and closed, betrayed nothing of the storm within. On the first page, in a hand that was alternately careful and trembling, were words that read not like the bravado of a public persona, but like the exhausted confession of a soul who had carried unbearable secrets alone. This is not the story of a celebrity's fall from grace. It is the story of how the private ache behind a polished smile became a quiet indictment of an industry that profits from silence. The diary's entries began, at first, with the small, familiar things, rehearsal schedules, hopes for a new role, notes to remember to call his mother. Then the tone shifted. Sentences grew short. Punctuation disappeared. The handwriting became jagged. He wrote about auditions that felt like tests of more than talent, about men in rooms that tasted of cologne and power, and about promises that sounded like careers but felt like entrapment. I told myself it was a line I had to cross. One entry read, "Everyone said this is how it works. This is show business." I kept smiling. I kept doing the work. I told myself I would be the one to stop it. I lied. Another page, dated months before his death, read, "I laugh until it hurts. I make them laugh, and they think it's joy. If they knew what I did to keep the camera on me, they would stop watching. If my mother knew, she would. I can't." The diary did not name names frequently. There were ellipses, shorthand, and a coded logic that spoke to caution and fear. But there were enough details to sketch a pattern. Late-night invites from powerful producers, private after-hours meetings, and a transactional atmosphere in which consent was declared negotiable and shame did the heavy lifting of silence. What made the pages most harrowing was not the fact of abuse. By itself, too many have, tragically, endured such things, but the voice of a young man who had measured the cost of speaking and decided the grief of silence was less dangerous than the fallout of naming his abusers. He believed the industry would swallow him. He believed the narrative would rewrite him as a liar or a troublemaker. He believed, ultimately, that fame's ladder was threaded with barbs, and he had no gloves. When his mother, JIANG, read the first page, the air in the room seemed to leave with every line. JIANG had known sacrifice. She had watched her son rehearse between factory shifts and save for headshots. She had known his dazzling smile, the way it warmed bank teller lines and family dinners. She had not known the nights he could not sleep, the way his fingers trembled when he tried to make small talk, the time he lied about an injury because the truth was too unspeakable. The diary arrived like an unsheathed blade. Reading it, she felt every omission as much as every sentence. Anger came first, hot, volcanic. How could people have done this to her son? How had he borne it alone? Grief followed, a cold, complicated thing that made the world both sharp and muffled. Guilt settled deepest. She should have known. She should have seen. She should have protected. "I held him when he was small," she wrote later in a letter to a friend. "I held him when he cried about scraped knees and school bullies. If only I had held him that last way. If only I had known the names of those bullies." But JIANG's grief was not only private. In the pages of the diary, she saw a testament she could not afford to shelve. Each line became a map of a system that cultivated dependency and punished the disobedient. Each ellipsis, a reason to press for answers. For JIANG, The diary was both a relic of sorrow and a call to action. In the weeks that followed, the diary circulation among a small circle of friends and trusted colleagues stoked a public conversation the entertainment world had, until then, mostly avoided. Journalists reached out. Advocacy groups offered legal counsel. Fans demanded transparency. And yet, even as outrage spread, the industry leaned on familiar defenses. Plausible deniability, contractual non-disclosure agreements, character assassination of accusers, and, above all, the argument that reputations are fragile and allegations destabilizing. What the diary revealed beyond specific acts was a culture, an economy of exchange in which career advancement was sometimes bartered for silence and compliance. Young performers, talented, ambitious, and often financially vulnerable, were taught to exchange integrity for traction. Managers and agents who failed to protect their clients sometimes benefited from proximity to powerful executives. Producers who insisted on after-hours private meetings posed as mentors while leveraging positional power. The whole system, the diary suggested, had been normalized. This is how it is done. One entry repeated like a refrain. Experts who reviewed the diary's patterns later told reporters that what it described was not an anomaly, but a recurring structural problem. The incentives of fame and money create a pressure cooker in which ethical boundaries blur. When the gatekeepers, executives, producers, influential casting directors are those who hold the keys, the risk of abuse multiplies. Victims are often left to weigh the price of truth, loss of work, ostracism, or being labeled a liar. Jiang's choice to speak out was not instantaneous. The diary had left her raw. The prospect of entering a courtroom or a public debate terrified her. She worried for her son's fans, her friends, and the family's privacy. But the diary also made her aware that staying silent would be an acquiescence to the same system that had devoured her son's joy. She began, quietly, with calls to other mothers. She joined a support group for families of survivors and learned, to her amazement and anger, that she was not alone. She found other diaries, other scribbled margins, other confessions kept out of sight. Together, they realized the diary was less a solitary confession than a symptom. Jiang moved from private anguish to public advocacy. She requested that the diary be used as evidence in ongoing inquiries. She appeared at press conferences not as a woman seeking vengeance, but as a mother demanding protection for the vulnerable. "My son was talented," she told a packed room. "He deserved to be safe. If silence killed him, then let his silence be the reason we change the rules." Her courage, the quiet, stubborn kind, reshaped the debate. Because Jiang could not point to a single high-profile perpetrator, every sentence carried its own distilled truth. She had the diary, the physical evidence of a life split between the stage and the dark. The public listened. The leather diary lay open on Jiang Mei's lap, its inked words trembling under the soft shake of her hands. She read the same sentences over and over, her eyes swimming but unable to look away. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed with ordinary sounds: children chasing balls, the faint call of a street vendor, the rustle of trees. But inside her home, every sound clashed against a silence that had suddenly turned unbearable. She could almost hear her son's voice in those words, the way he hesitated, the way he swallowed pain with a smile that the public mistook for confidence. Each entry pulled her deeper into a world she never knew he lived in, a world where promises were poisoned and kindness was a disguise. The first time she read the line, "If my mother knew, she would break," she did break. The sobs ripped out of her chest like something ancient, unstoppable. She pressed the diary to her chest, whispering his name again and again, as if the sound of it might stitch him back into her arms. That night, Jiang dreamt of him as a child again, running into her arms with scraped knees and a laugh that always came quicker than tears. In the dream, she held him tight and told him she would never let go. But she woke to the leather book on her bedside table, a cruel reminder that she had already let go without even knowing it. The following days became rituals of pain. Every morning, she opened a page. Every page was another wound. Sometimes the words were rushed, as if he scribbled them in fear of being caught. Sometimes they were neat, almost rehearsed, as if he wanted them found someday. He wrote of hotel rooms that turned into prisons, of men who spoke of opportunity like it was a gift, but treated his body like collateral. He wrote of the moments afterward, the guilt that crawled through his skin, the shower that couldn't wash it away, the mirror that showed a face he no longer recognized. Most haunting were the moments of silence on the page. Empty dates, weeks with no entries. Jiang wondered if those were the times he tried to forget, or if those were the times when the pain was too much even to write down. Jiang began to replay his public life through the lens of the diary. She remembered the awards show where he had smiled so brightly, yet his eyes had darted nervously off stage. She remembered the interviews where he laughed too hard at jokes that weren't funny. She remembered the day he came home and said, "I just want to make you proud." She thought she had been proud then. Now she wondered if he had been begging for her to see behind the words. Every fan photo, every poster, every drama he starred in now looked different. To the world, those were images of joy and success. To Jiang, they were now photographs of survival, of a man pretending so well that no one asked what the cost was. Word of the diary spread quietly among close friends at first. Some denied it could be true, not him, not their golden star. Others wept, confessing they had seen glimpses of his struggles, but never pressed hard enough. A few admitted they had heard whispers in the industry, stories tucked away like shameful secrets. But Jiang was no longer interested in whispers. She had his words, carved in ink, and they demanded to be heard. One evening, she stood at her son's old vanity, the one with the cracked mirror he used to practice lines in front of as a teenager. She placed the diary on the table, lit a candle beside it, and said aloud, "You will not be forgotten, not for what they did to you, not for what you endured, not for what you wrote." Her reflection stared back, weary but fierce. For the first time since his death, Jiang felt something beyond grief, a burning need to transform his silence into testimony. She contacted an old family friend who worked in media. At first, he hesitated. Stories like these were dangerous. Careers could be destroyed. But Jiang placed the diary in his hands, let him read a few pages, and waited. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "This isn't just his story," he whispered. "This is everyone's story who never got to tell it." Together, they began to plan how to share the truth responsibly. They knew the industry would resist, deny, and smear. But Jiang no longer cared. She had spent her life protecting her son, but protection had failed him. Now, she would protect his memory by making sure his pain was not erased. The first article that mentioned the diary went viral overnight. Readers were stunned by the contrast between the smiling actor they thought they knew and the broken voice revealed in his writings. Fans flooded social media with grief, anger, and vows to demand justice. Hashtags trended worldwide, calling not only for answers but for a reckoning in the